Good afternoon, and a very warm welcome back to Miss P Presents with me, Miss P. Today I am going to be talking you through books I have read whilst travelling. So without further ado, grab yourself a drink and let's get talking. Thank you, Geoffrey. Now, dear friends, we all know how difficult it can be to find your first choice reads whilst travelling. But I am not above book exchanges, I am not above second-hand bookshops, and of course with these limitations can come great opportunities. And today I am very excited to share the books that I have sought out or stumbled upon whilst travelling. Of course, it can be even more difficult when you are not prepared for a trip. I did not expect to be leaving the country so soon, but circumstances... Geoffrey, who's that on the telephone? Now, before you say anything, that trebuchet was small and we hardly caused any damage. Not calling about that. Who is this? Oh, no, nothing, my man. Don't worry at all. What is this regarding? Firearms? But it was just a straightforward shooting weekend, and the pigeons were clay. I'm a vegetarian, for God's sake. Well, pescatarian. You don't expect me to go without my terrines, do you? Fled the scene? I had to change for the evening. Well, yes, now you mention it, I am in Argentina. I don't think I like your tone. Put me on with the Chief Inspector. Hello, Bill. I haven't seen you since my soiree when you left with my good friend Annabelle. Annabelle Dixon. Annabelle Dixon Mayer. You know who I'm talking about. How is your wife? I thought as much. No. Really, Bill, not to worry. Just see to it that they never call me at home again. I forgive you. Goodbye. Now that little distraction is at an end, let us get to the books. The first on my list is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. This honestly is just astonishing, impeccable writing. It reminded me of Donna Tartt's The Goldfinch in the sense that I couldn't believe how consistently good the writing was. Demon Copperhead is 550 pages long, and every sentence is absolutely remarkable. This is one that I wouldn't necessarily have picked up at home. The subject matter is heavy, but then again, what would one expect from a modern adaptation of a Dickens novel?
It was bleak indeed.
Our protagonist, Damon, is born into a world of addiction, and is brought up knowing drug misuse, poverty, alcoholism, and to a certain extent, neglect. Life is hard, but gets harder still when Damon becomes part of the care system, and is taken in by a series of guardians who, far from being concerned for his welfare, are all too keen to exploit him. It's a terrifying look into how America's opioid crisis destroys lives, many before they've even had the chance to begin. Honestly, it's remarkable. I was blown away by this book and couldn't recommend it highly enough. Next up, we have Howard's End by E.M. Forster. This one is very much up my street, and I was absolutely delighted when I stumbled across it in the lobby of some hotel in Mexico. I adore the way that Forster writes about people. His observations and remarks on human behaviour and manners are sharp, revealing, and insightfully damning. Everything is so charmingly and so cleverly put, and because of that I felt compelled on several occasions to summon Geoffrey into the room for the purpose of reading something out loud. The focus of the novel is Margaret Schlegel, the eldest of 3 grown-up siblings who live together in Wickham Place, a fashionable address near Westminster in London. The circles Margaret moves in, along with her sister Helen, are highly intellectual, and though the pair are in many ways different, a fact that becomes increasingly clear as the novel progresses, both are cultured, clever, warm-hearted, and idealistic. Circumstances and chance meetings bring the sisters into contact with 2 vastly different families, the wealthy traditional Wilcoxes and the lower middle-class Basts. Margaret's dealings with both Wilcoxes and Basts pull her in different directions, calling into question her character, values, morals, and beliefs. It's a tale of class divides in a rapidly changing England. Original, thought-provoking, and liberating. Next up, we have The Lady and the Unicorn by Tracy Chevalier. I loved this book. Something that Chevalier has a real talent for is bridging the gap between the past and present. There is a real universality to her writing that makes you care, understand, and empathise with these 15th century characters, some of whom are based on real people. And she manages to do this whilst upholding an authenticity to it all. It never for a moment feels as though she's imposing contemporary views onto these people that lived in the past. On the contrary, Chevalier brings us as readers into their world so that we can see and experience life through their eyes. Before I started this book, I had concerns that I might find it a little dull due to its being about tapestries. I've always been more of a wallpaper girl, you see. But Chevalier makes the process of creating these tapestries so utterly compelling. The amount of detail is incredible, and I also really enjoyed reading the descriptions of what life was like for people of different social classes in Paris and Brussels at that time. Geoffrey, I believe, particularly enjoyed reading about the lives of the household servants, as is his wont. Chevalier also writes people so well, and the novel is actually told from the perspectives of several different characters, so we are hearing their individual voices in the first person. We learn about their motivations, their desires, their fears, their relationships with themselves, and their relationships with others. And that, for me, is what really drives the novel. It's interesting, beautiful, and highly imaginative. Next up, Our Man in Havana by Graham Greene. I thoroughly enjoyed this novel. It's funny, sophisticated, clever, and so well thought out. For me, a large part of this novel's charm lies in the simplicity of the plot and the tongue-in-cheek nature of the writing. James Wormold is a down-on-his-luck vacuum cleaner salesman, living in Havana, Cuba during the years of the Cold War. Business is bad, and Wormold's manipulative daughter Millie is proving to have outrageously expensive taste. Cue Agent Hawthorne of MI6. Turns out they've been looking for a British agent in Havana and believe that Wormold may just prove to be the very man for the job. Clueless and unwilling, but in desperate need of the cash, Wormold finds himself filing phony reports, imagining military installations, and pretending to hire sub-agents. It's wonderfully comic, but also suspenseful. There are splashes of adventure, intrigue, romance, and terror. I particularly loved the interludes in London in which Agent Hawthorne reports back to the chief. Terribly witty and so much fun. Next up, we have Funny Girl by Nick Hornby. What I particularly loved about this novel was the setting, both time and place. The time being the 1960s, and the place a BBC television studio. The novel opens with its protagonist, Barbara Parker, having just won the 1964 Miss Blackpool competition. But Barbara doesn't want to be Miss Blackpool 1964, especially since accepting the title would mean remaining in her hometown for a whole year of shaking hands and ribbon cutting. One sympathises, Geoffrey. Instead, Barbara moves to London, changes her name to Sophie Straw, and promptly secures both an agent and the lead role in a new sitcom, Barbara and Jim. Parts of Funny Girl reminded me of my favourite television drama, The Hour. I loved being privy to the read-throughs, rehearsals, interviews, live shows, backstage spats and after-parties. The novel has a joyous quality to it, mirroring the 1960s comedy sitcom era it describes. The dialogue is brilliant, the characters are authentic, it's stylish, funny, and thoroughly enjoyable. And now, The Beautiful Visit by Elizabeth Jane Howard. I am a huge E.J. Howard fan, and very much hope to do a feature on her Cazalet Chronicles at some point in the near future. The Beautiful Visit is the first of hers that I've read, not in that series, and it did not disappoint, though it's probably not a book that I'd recommend to everyone. I personally adore coming-of-age novels set during this period, the early 20th century, and written in this style. That style being a narrative which follows a poor, prospectless young woman, much preoccupied with the monotony of her days and her own thoughts, being invited to the home of some exciting family friends, and being introduced to a group of people who will change everything. Ah, tea. Thank you, Geoffrey. There's Deb, older and aloof and too glamorous for words. Rupert, devilish handsome, charming, but also irascible. Lucy, the sweetest girl imaginable. And Mrs. Lansing, the lady of the house. A sensible woman of judgment and taste, whose belief it is that people who know each other should never be allowed to talk together at parties. Couldn't agree more, Geoffrey. The protagonist's life is one that has known little pleasure or excitement up until this point, but then the visit ends, and life returns to its old pattern. No more, Geoffrey. I've got my tango lesson with Santiago in 10 minutes. Is that Santiago, Geoffrey? Tell him I'll just get my coat. What do you mean he's not coming? He normally always picks me up. Keeping it professional. Has a wife? You call him back, Geoffrey. You tell him that I can very easily take my business elsewhere. Not a shortage of Argentine tango teachers in Buenos Aires. You tell him that. He smelled very nice, though, Geoffrey. It's a shame. The atmosphere created by Howard is both chilling and exciting. The limitations imposed on the protagonist by both her family and society are such that she lacks autonomy, with almost no knowledge of her options or her own power. Indeed, the novel asks the question, does she have either of these things? She's determined for something to happen, but is so repressed, so incapable of taking any decisive action, that she often comes across miserable and insipid. And who can blame her? It's a very cleverly written, thought-provoking novel, and I enjoyed it immensely. Next up, 5/4 of the Orange by Joanne Harris. Like the 1999 smash Chocolat, something that 5/4 of the Orange does so well is atmosphere. It delights all 5 of one's senses, though perhaps in particular those of taste and smell. 5/4 of the Orange literally had me salivating as I read, though the role of food in the book is nothing if not complex. It tells the story of Framboise Simon, an older woman who, at the start of the novel, returns to the small village in which she grew up, on the banks of the Loire Valley in France. It becomes apparent that Framboise's family, her mother, older brother and sister, left under an extremely dark cloud more than 50 years ago, during the Second World War, and though Framboise has longed to return, she does so now with trepidation, assuming a different name and keeping her true identity a secret. Harris's ability to weave together different narratives and different time periods make for compelling reading. And as the terrible truth about what happened all of those years ago is slowly revealed, so too is that teasing darkness that has been hovering throughout, threatening to implode as the novel has gone on. 5/4 of the Orange is a novel about secrets, betrayal, family, food, fear, and forgiveness. It's frightening, it's beautiful, it's magical, and it's brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Next up, The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. This is a fantastic read, truly deserving of all of the praise and all of the hype it received when it was first published 10 years ago now in 2014. For me, it's always a real joy to discover a piece of historical fiction that is as readable as it is high quality. The Miniaturist is absolutely fantastic on both of those scores. The year is 1686, and 18-year-old Nella Ortman, the novel's protagonist, has just arrived in Amsterdam to begin a new life as the wife of wealthy merchant trader Johannes Brand. At first, nothing is as she suspected it would be. Her husband is aloof and often absent. His sister Marion is sharp-tongued and spiky. and both their expectations of Nella do not fit with her preconceptions of what a wife would be. Everything about this novel enticed me, from the rich, hypnotic sensory descriptions to the number of interesting and complex characters. It's exciting, mysterious, atmospheric, completely unputdownable. Next up, A Man Called Ove by Frederick Backman. This is a brilliant, laugh-out-loud funny novel about an older man called Ove who lives on his own and spends his days tutting and snarling and judging everyone and everything that crosses his path. In many ways unlikable, Ove's remarks and observations about his neighbours are astute and amusing, and more often than not, I found myself nodding along and agreeing with his gripes. BMW drivers are the worst. The local council is useless, and arrogant men in white shirts are quite simply impossible. Not you, dear Geoffrey, for goodness sake. Ove's highly particular outlook on life is both engaging and amusing, but also poignant. As the story of his life unfolds, you'll find yourself rooting for him and cheering him on as though you've known him forever. And finally, we have I Will Find You by Harlan Coben. This is one that I definitely wouldn't have picked up in a bookshop, but to my surprise, I really enjoyed it. Coben is the master of the page-turner, and because of that, I pretty much read the entire thing in just one sitting. David Burrows, the protagonist, is 5 years into a lifelong prison sentence for murdering his son Matthew. And though David knows he didn't do it, the evidence against him is overwhelming. Devastated by grief, anger, and injustice, David all but gives up hope. That is, until he receives a visit from his sister-in-law, Rachel. She's got something to show him. A photograph taken by some friends during a recent visit to a theme park whilst on holiday. There's a boy in the background that seems strangely familiar, and though they know it must be impossible, both David and Laura are certain. The boy in the background of the photograph is Matthew. What ensues is a thrilling, hair-raising, adrenaline-fueled adventure to discover what happened that tragic night and, far-fetched though it seems, to rescue their beloved Matthew. I defy you not to read it all in one sitting. Super exciting stuff. And there you have it. I hope that's given you some inspiration for novels to seek out whilst you're at home. I'd love to stay and chat, but much to do, milongas and so forth. Naturally, I'm expected. Must get ready. Ooh, if anyone could send my hair straighteners direct to the hotel here in Buenos Aires, I really am in dire need of them and would be forever in your debt. Geoffrey, what's going on out there? Ooh, my dance teacher's arrived. Thank you so much for watching my channel. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe so you can keep up to date with all things Miss P Presents. See you next time.